The day began just like any other, a typical morning with the sun streaming through my windows and the usual hustle and bustle of the city outside. Little did I know that today would be the start of a series of bizarre and unsettling events. It all started with an unexpected knock on my door. When I opened it, I found one of the tenants from the floor below standing there, looking rather annoyed. He complained about strange noises coming from my apartment and asked me to stop moving things around so late at night. At first, I was confused. I told him he must be mistaken because I hadn't been moving anything around at night. Despite my explanation, he seemed convinced that the noise was coming from directly above his apartment. I couldn't understand what he was talking about, but I promised to keep an eye on the situation. A few days later, I began noticing something peculiar myself. Initially, it was just little things. Objects around the house seemed out of place. My keys weren't where I usually left them. A book I had been reading was on a different table, and a chair seemed slightly moved from its usual spot. I brushed it off, thinking I might be forgetful and distracted. Work had been particularly stressful lately, with tight deadlines and high expectations, so I had a lot on my mind. I figured I was simply misremembering where I had placed things. But then, something happened that I simply couldn't ignore. One morning, I woke up to find the furniture in my apartment had been completely rearranged while I was sleeping. The couch was on the opposite side of the room, the dining table had been shifted, and even small items like lamps and decorations were in different places. It was as if someone had come in and redecorated my entire apartment during the night. Nothing was missing, and there were no signs of a break-in. Being a light sleeper, I couldn't fathom how this could happen without me waking up from the noise. This strange occurrence left me feeling deeply unsettled. How could all this happen without me hearing a thing? My thoughts were interrupted by another knock on the door. It was the downstairs neighbor again. This time, he was much more agitated, and I could tell his patience was running out. He demanded an explanation and said the noise was keeping him up at night. I didn't know what to say, but he threatened to submit an official complaint to the building owner if I didn't stop. Things were getting worse, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. The last thing I needed was to get evicted from my apartment. Determined to figure out what was going on, I decided to use the weekend to investigate further. I quietly moved the furniture back to its original place, made sure my front door was locked, and set up my phone to record any audio while I was sleeping. I hoped that the audio recording might provide some clues as to what was happening. That night, I went to bed feeling a mix of fear and anticipation, hoping that the recording would reveal something. The next morning, I woke up and saw that, once again, all the furniture had been rearranged in exactly the same way as before. On one hand, I was fearful of what was happening, but on the other, I was hopeful that my phone had picked up something that might reveal the truth. I could only sit in silence and disbelief as I played back the audio. To my surprise, the recording was filled with strange noises, scraping sounds, thumps, and even what sounded like whispers. Yet somehow, I hadn't woken up. I still couldn't understand how I wasn't awoken by these noises, especially since the neighbor downstairs could hear them. The thought of having a stranger in my apartment moving things around while I slept was extremely unsettling. If I was going to go to the police, I knew I needed some solid proof. Audio recordings alone wouldn't be enough. So, I decided to set up a camera and leave it recording overnight. This would undoubtedly reveal the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. That night, I set up the camera in the living room, making sure it had a clear view of the entire space. I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows before going to bed. Strangely enough, I found myself almost getting used to the idea of finding my furniture in a different place each morning. I knew it was only a temporary measure until I could get to the bottom of this mystery. The following morning, with a sense of dread, I checked the camera footage. What I witnessed next was something truly terrifying. As I watched the footage, I saw the furniture moving on its own. Chairs slid across the floor, the couch shifted, and small items levitated and rearranged themselves. There was no visible person or entity in the footage, just the eerie movement of my belongings. It was as if an invisible force was at work in my apartment. Seeing this footage left me feeling utterly lost and completely alone. I had no idea what to do or who to turn to. The idea of having nowhere else to stay and no one to help was daunting. Despite my fear, I decided to spend another night in the apartment. This time, I left the furniture as it was, hoping that if I didn't disturb it, whatever was causing this might leave me alone. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, listening for any sounds. The apartment was eerily silent. Hours passed, and I felt a sense of dread building up inside me. Just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard a faint whisper, followed by the sound of furniture moving again. I stayed in bed, paralyzed with fear, not daring to get up and investigate. The next morning, I checked the camera footage once more. This time, the movements were more aggressive. The furniture wasn't just being rearranged, it was being thrown around the room. Chairs toppled over, the table was pushed violently, and items were knocked off shelves. Whatever was causing this was becoming more active and more dangerous. I knew I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. I needed to find a solution, and fast. I decided to reach out to a friend who had some experience with the paranormal. I showed him the footage, and he was equally shocked. He suggested bringing in a professional to investigate and possibly cleanse the apartment. The next few days were a whirlwind. The paranormal investigator arrived, equipped with various tools and gadgets. He conducted a thorough investigation and concluded that there was indeed a presence in the apartment. He performed a cleansing ritual, hoping to banish whatever was causing the disturbances. After the cleansing, the apartment felt different. The air seemed lighter, and the oppressive feeling was gone. I spent a few more nights there, and to my relief, the strange occurrences stopped. The furniture stayed in place, and there were no more strange noises or movements. Although the ordeal was over, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I had come face to face with something beyond my understanding, something that had invaded my home and my sense of security. The experience had left a lasting impact on me, a reminder that there are things in this world that we cannot explain, and sometimes they are closer than we think.